Happy New Year, art lovers, and welcome back to my studio. Now, my initial instincts for the first video of 2021 was to do a recap of the end of 2020, but honestly, the more I went over all of the not so fun things that happened at the end of last year, the lower I felt. So instead, I just decided to skip it. I was also thankfully blessed by a new collector who requested that I work on this King of Spades painting. And frankly, that was just a more positive outlook for me. So I decided to take a deep breath, let go of the past, and focus on the bright future. I'd also like to say a huge shout out, thank you, and welcome to all of the new subscribers that have joined my channel in recent months. I want to say in this past year, my subscribers have doubled, and most of that was after Inktober. So thank you so much for joining. I hope that you've enjoyed the content thus far, and I hope that you'll stick around. But if you are relatively new and you're wondering about the origin of this illustration, I'll place a link up on top here to the Hallowed Horn playlist, and that's where this piece comes from. It was a collection of pieces that I did a little while back where I just did the line art, and it was all inspired by African horned animals and playing cards and combining the two. And prior to this piece, I completed the Jack of Hearts to start and then the Queen of Spades. And now, by special request, I'm working here on the King of Spades as well. For each suit, I illustrated a King, Queen, and Jack, with the Jacks being the spirit of that suit and the warriors of their clan, the Queen being kind of the mind and intellect, and then the King being the heart of that kingdom or clan. If you do go back and look at the previous videos, you'll notice that a lot of the horned animals that I chose are cousins or offshoots of the antelope. I've always thought antelopes had this sense of regality and like poise about them that just makes you think of royalty. And the variety of natural crowns that they can have always piqued my interest. I think one of the more difficult parts of this painting for me was making sure that it would match the original Queen painting that I did. There was a very distinctive luminance to the clothing that I wanted to make sure was represented in this piece as well. And while I think the result was a little less saturated, I did find a way to make the fabric special for this king towards the end. Now, before I get back to that, I actually start working on the hair and how I wanted it to be rendered. The animal that I chose for this king is called the Greater Kudu, and it actually has this really beautiful coloring in the ears that shift from kind of a brown to deep magenta red into white at the tips, and I immediately knew that's how I wanted the transition of her hair to be. Now, I know the most common way to produce a gradient in watercolor is to work from lightest to darkest, but I tend to find that leaves my colors more muted than I want it to be, so I personally prefer to work from highest saturation to least saturation, and that's kind of what I did here with the magenta. And I suppose in a sense I'm still going from lightest to darkest because the magenta is the lightest of the tones in the hair, but I don't know, something about doing it the other way around leaves it, like I said, for me, either really desaturated or really patchy in the application. So I start with the most saturated magenta and then I move into the deeper browns before pulling it all down into the most desaturated tone. Lastly, I went in with a little bit of white watercolor from the bottom and pulled it up to smooth out the transition between that white and pink. Usually I don't use white watercolor because I feel like it just makes things cloudy, but it actually really worked for this purpose. Next up, I move on to the horns, and again, I keep a reference nearby so that way I can make sure that I'm achieving the right kind of texture. And this part was really fun, but it was a little difficult because for whatever reason, my hand was moving perfectly fine for the right horn, but when I tried to like flip it and do the opposite for the left horn, I don't know, it wasn't coming out right, and I couldn't quite get my hand to do what I wanted it to do at first. So I kept going back and forth and like pushing and pulling, and there was definitely a point at which I was kind of kicking myself because I had gotten this far and I felt like I was really like dropping the ball, but I kept working at it, and I think the result actually ended up in it looking a bit more realistic and weighty, and I think I'm really happy with the outcome because I think it actually gives it more of that textured look that I was hoping for, and if I didn't have to push and pull it, it would have felt way too smooth. So once I was satisfied with the horns, I went back into Procreate and started working on solutions for making the fabric of her blouse feel a little bit more royal. And you guys, if you're not using Procreate, get it, because this is just one of so many reasons why I love this app. It really helps to keep my process fluid and moving, and whenever I feel like I've hit a mental wall, I know that I can always go back into Procreate and find a solution and rework things and make it even better. Like, I had known that I wanted there to be some gold accents to her garment from the beginning, but I wasn't sure where to put it, and I decided not to worry about it because there were so many other steps that I had to do first, and being able to go back in and not just like not have to second guess myself, that I could apply it and see if it worked, and if it didn't, I could move it around. It creates a really awesome like peace of mind when you're working, that you don't have to stress about every single detail from the beginning. You can work on the parts that you know and then make the other parts work later. And then once the bulk of the painting and the gold detailing was complete, I went ahead and removed all of the excess blue tape so that way I could paint the border of this card. I also noticed that the tape on the very edges of my paper like refused to stick anymore, so I just reused that tape that was on the inner part of the page to hold down my paper long enough for me to get this border done. At this point, we're at just about the end of this painting, but before I go, I just want to say another huge thank you to the collector who purchased this original painting and requested that I do something from the Hollowed Horn collection. When I look back at the positive aspects of 2020, I realized that I actually completed quite a few commissions and gained followers on so many platforms, and I'm really just grateful for all of you out there. Starting off the year with this piece that was just so comfortable and relaxing really reaffirmed for me that I am making art that people enjoy and that stands the test of time. I want to say I created this collection back in 2017 or 2018, and to know that it still holds up means a lot. And again, if you do check out that playlist and there are any other cards that you want to see brought to life, go ahead and name them in the comments below, and I'd be happy to paint another one. Now, I feel like this rarely happens so close to the end, but I realized it still was lacking in something. I mean, this is the king, the empress. She needed more oomph, and so I went back into trusty Procreate and kind of just played around with some options to give the background a little bit more pizzazz, and I decided on just going in with a really watered down version of my Coliro metallic watercolor to just give the background a little bit of sparkle. Maybe one of the more important parts of this painting were the eyes. I went back and forth for so long on what to do with the eyes, but I think the problem that I was running into was the shape. Since I made them so close to the kudu's eye shape, no matter where I placed the iris, she just looked a little bit bizarre and kind of cross-eyed. So again, I went back into Procreate and played around and reminded myself that in the Old Kingdom of Egypt, kings were viewed as gods incarnate. They were the physical manifestation of the divine. So I've decided to give her what I've coined as oracle eyes, befitting of her station. Literally, anytime you see these kinds of eyes in one of my paintings, they represent for me divinity and the absolute power to see the truth beyond all lies and illusions. Once she had her eyes, I was able to finish off this piece with all of the white accents and highlights. For this, I tend to reach for my Dr. P.H. Martin's white pen ink. It's actually pretty water soluble, so if you do make any mistakes, you can kind of clean it up just like you would watercolor. I didn't need to this time, but it's always what I go for because it is what I would consider to be semi-permanent instead of permanent like I thought it was when I bought it. You'll see in a second here that I also went in and gave her a little bit more highlight to the white tips of her hair. And I will, of course, be sure to add a list of the supplies that I used for this painting. I know I didn't name them all, but they will be down in the description below. If you've made it this far, I do just want to say thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in this piece, I will have prints available in my online shop. If you did like this video, don't forget to like it and do all the subscribey, sharey, belly things that are required by YouTube. And yeah, I love y'all so much for watching, and I'll see you real soon in the next video. Bye!